Today I thought I'd do something a little different, and so this isn't so much a single book review as it is me talking about a few different books from a field that is interesting to me and I think is interesting to a lot of people. Now, generally, I know a lot of people are interested in mythology. People love Greek, Nordic mythology, what have you. So I thought it'd be an interesting idea to do a video over some Celtic mythology. Because recently I've begun reading into a lot of Celtic mythology, and I thought I'd just share a few books that are some great places to start if you're interested in the subject. Some great books to find some really entertaining stories. And when I say Celtic mythology, in this sense, the locations I'm going to be talking about are going to be Ireland, Wales, and modern England or Britain. I'm not going to talk any about Scottish mythology at all, even though I will include a book that has some, just because I haven't read that much of it at all, and I'd rather talk about some of the fields I'm more well versed in. So, the first thing I'm going to start off here is Irish mythology, and if you're interested in learning some Irish mythology, this is a great book. This is called The Tain. It's spelt Tain, as in T-A-I-N, but is pronounced Tain, as you can tell by this interesting little symbol above the A. And this is about a 250 or so page book that contains the Irish epic. I'm not even going to try to pronounce the rest of it because I'm not very good at Gaelic pronunciations, but it's from an Irish epic, kind of like how there's other epics like the Odyssey, which I'm sure most people are familiar with. And this details a very interesting story. Well, it's hard to explain. Two men kind of turn into cows, and then there's a war that breaks out over them, and then one man named Cuailnge is a frightening man who can transform into essentially the Hulk and then destroy everyone. So as with most mythologies, expect it to be a little weird by today's modern standards. But if you're interested in learning about Irish mythology, this is a great place to start, in my opinion. It's a very entertaining tale. To be honest, out of everything I'm talking about today, this is probably my least favorite, but that doesn't mean I didn't enjoy it still. It was still a very fun read. Just some parts were a little too weird for me, which sounds weird when you're talking about mythology, but just something about it turned me off a little bit. And once again, that's not to say I didn't enjoy it, because I really liked this book. It's just that, comparatively to the other ones I'm going to speak on, this one wasn't my absolute favorite. And don't think this is the only source of Irish mythology, because there's a lot more out there than just what's in here. I just think this is a great place to start learning about some of it. Following that up, my second favorite source of Celtic mythology thus far I've found is the Mabinogion. Mabinogion? Some people say Mabinogion. I say Mabinogion. So I'm sorry if you're offended by my pronunciation. And this one is a translation. It was a new translation. I'm not going to bother trying to pronounce the name because I know I'll get it wrong. You can tell by the cover, but this is there's a Penguin edition out which I've looked at in this edition, and in my opinion, this is a superior translation. It also has some wonderful notes in the back explaining things and giving great context to the stories. Now, what this is a collection of Welsh mythology. Tales from Wales. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to rhyme. And this one, I really liked all the stories in there. I thought they were great. There are plenty of mentions of King Arthur, in case you can't get enough of that guy. He's in here a lot. And a lot of these stories have been, to some extent, Christianized, because they make plenty of mentions of the Christian God in these stories. But for the most part, the stories aren't overly affected, which is nice to see, because in some mythologies, when Christianity began to come in, the stories would begin to get distorted in some way that would better reflect the religion of Christianity instead of the original mythological beliefs, which is unfortunate, but that's what would happen. In this, that does somewhat happen, but not to the degree where the original stories are really lost. And this is really just a collection of various stories about Welsh mythology, whereas the Tain was more of a continuous story. Well, since it's an epic, this is more of a collection with some connections between the separate stories. but I really enjoyed this, and there's some great stories in here that I enjoyed very much. Stories about giants, dragons, cauldrons that bring people back to life, King Arthur. What was my favorite one? I think it was in this one, when a man was going to hang a mouse for stealing from him, and then all the priests and bishops in the land tried to convince him otherwise, and then you'll have to read it. It's weird, like most mythology, and I say that in a good way, as in it's quite different from our modern standards of literature, which makes this kind of thing very interesting, more so if you're interested in anything Celtic mythology. And the third book I was going to talk about is a great collection of Celtic mythology, titled Celtic Myths and Legends, appropriately, by Peter Beresford Ellis. Now this edition is nice, or this book rather, because it contains a very good amount of excerpts from Celtic mythology from various sources. So there are 6 or 7 stories from Ireland, from Irish mythologies here. There are, I think, 4 or 5 from Scottish, another 6 or 7 from Wales, and then they have some of my favorite here, some of the British mythology, and this is my absolute favorite that I've read so far, towards the end of the book. I guess I can't really say why. Something about it's been very entertaining to me, and maybe it still retains that sense of being out there and weird and different like you want from mythology, but it seems more westernized in a sense, more similar to what I'm used to reading, but not to the point where it loses its value as mythology, which is what I think makes the stories in this one, or at least the British stories in this one, so entertaining to me. But really this one, if you're interested in Celtic mythology but don't want to get the other 2 books or whatever, just want a nice place to start, I think this is the best choice, because it contains a wonderful little selection of stories from each mythology, and it's certainly very entertaining. So, these 3 books, if you're interested in Celtic mythology at all, I recommend these 3 books as a great place to start. Once again, that's the Mabinogion, the Tain, and whatever this one was, Celtic Myths and Legends. And if you enjoyed them, there's plenty more material out there that you can find, and maybe I can someday do a video on some more advanced material, but I think this is a great starting point. I'm not going to give any kind of rating or anything, because this is more of a personal recommendation of some things I enjoyed that I think people could find a good start if they're interested in learning more about mythology. And I don't really believe in giving ratings to something like mythology or native stories. So instead I'll say they were very good, and I enjoyed them very much. And if you read them, I think you will too, if you have an interest in the subject matter. So thank you for watching, and as always, I hope you enjoy the books.